Some of the states have already legalized and it's working.
Providing a fresh perspective on the events shaping the cannabis industry. With your host, Deputy Chief of Roc NORML,
Steve Vanderwall.
From business and politics to medicine and technology, and everything in between. This is Roc NORML Radio.
What is up, everybody? My name is Steve Vanderwall. I'm the Deputy Chief of Roc NORML, and welcome to another episode of Roc NORML Radio. Today, we're going to be talking about the emergence of AgriTech in the cannabis industry and how innovations in this space are paving the way for what is destined to be amongst the most profitable industries in history. So what exactly is AgriTech? AgriTech is the use of technology for farming that is developed to improve efficiency and profitability. While most commonly used in horticulture and agriculture, AgriTech is also found in forestry, aquaculture, and viticulture. AgriTech aims to improve farming through information monitoring and analysis of weather, pests, soil, and air temperature. AgriTech also includes the use of automation, such as controlling heaters and irrigation and employing pest control mechanisms. So some technologies and applications in AgriTech include things like drones, satellite photography and sensors, phase tracking, weather forecasts, automated irrigation, light and heat control, and the list goes on. To discuss this topic further, I've invited my good friend, Dave Feligno, Vice President of Talent for an emerging agri-tech company called STEM Cultivation. These guys are working on some mind-blowing shit in the field, and I'm super excited to talk to him today. Ladies and gentlemen, Dave Feligno.
Hey, how are you?
What's going on, man? Thanks for being in studio today.
Thanks for inviting me. This is great.
Yeah, this is episode 2. There's going to be a twice-a-weekly podcast talking about anything in the cannabis industry. It's one of those things that we are all having these conversations involving the industry, whether it's tech or medicine or politics, and finally giving it an outlet to communicate with everyone who cares.
Fantastic.
So who are you and what's your background? What got you into this industry?
Well, it's a good question, right? So my official background was I was in software sales for the longest time, right? And decided to make a career move back in 2009 to executive search, actually. So I was living in New York City doing boutique executive search firm startup type stuff, right? So SaaS, ad tech, information security, really like, early stage companies, beyond the seed range. Did that for quite some time and then decided to move back from New York City to Rochester, right? Which is, I grew up around here. I was from Geneva, New York originally, but came back to be back with some aging family here. And, started my own little search firm for a little while, worked with 680 Partners again, and then was just kind of, let's call it, looking for an opportunity, to let's call it, get back into formal talent acquisition. So I was a manager of talent acquisition for Carestream, which is a health company right here. If you've been to Frontier Field, Yep. You have seen Carestream. It's the same parking lot, basically, right? But funny enough, May 14th of 2018, which is actually my 1-year anniversary with STEM full-time, is actually tomorrow. I decided to take off from Carestream and formally join forces with STEM Cultivation, which is an interesting story altogether. The CEO of STEM Cultivation, Kyle Moffitt, he's one of the co-founders. Chris Denaro is the other co-founder of our company. I actually did hiring for Kyle when he was at a place called Digital Guardian.
Small world.
And that's where Chris Denaro came from. I was doing a search for his inside sales team, came across Chris, just a bright guy, put those two together, joined forces, and lo and behold, I think it was probably a year and a half into Chris working for Kyle, we found out that they had some other interests, right? And that's kind of what spawned STEM Cultivation. I wouldn't say as a formal thing. They actually wanted to start an RMD, which is a registered marijuana dispensary in Massachusetts, but found out that process is going to be just capital intensive. It takes a long time. You're looking at probably somewhere between $2 to $5 million. And that initial wave, chump change, right? Like everybody's got a couple million in the bank, right? But they found that they just couldn't access that kind of capital, and they didn't have that kind of time. But they did want to get into, let's call it the picks and shovels aspect of what was going on. And they had an idea. They had an idea for vertical growing. Let's do vertical hydroponics, and that is where, let's call it, the first iteration of the STEM box was actually built out of. And they decided to drop the R&D. They were Boston Therapeutics at that time, just dumped that whole idea. And we're like, well, if we're going to do something in this industry, which we definitely want to be a part of it, we want to build this technology. And that's where the formal, let's call it, vertical hydroponic towers came out of, right? So they built I think it was a 16 plant kind of test grow, and built it in Chris's basement basically, and started testing this technology out. And they got through their first grow, and lo and behold, he gave me a call. He was like, "This is really it. I think we're going to shift all of our focus into, let's call it, making sure that we can build a technology out of this in some way, shape, or form." So of course we pivoted towards let's make a growtainer, right? Because everybody was on the growtainer kick, right? We're talking about companies like Freight Farms, who were doing more like, let's call it, vegetable, like bib lettuce, microgreens, and so on and so forth. But they were kind of one of those folks out there that really kind of formalized what a container could do, or we want to call it a grow pod, or whatever you want to call it. And so what do? We bought a container. We put it in the back of a parking lot. Someone's let us use like a bunch of their space, and we started to build the growtainer using kind of our proprietary. And we found out that nothing was square on it, because growtainers are certainly, any container that you buy, I wouldn't say growtainers specifically, they're all bent. They're not just square. Like, they just are not the perfect way. And when we're building something that's so precise, we found that things weren't lining up from the back to the front. So they literally just stopped building, and we're like, we're going to have to do this by hand, right? So we just scrapped the whole growtainer idea, and found some space in Salem by luck and by happenstance. After we had a little bit of an incident with the locals in Salem, we were trying to build in the back of this ice cream shop. We got some space there, and I remember Kyle called me up one night, and he was like, "We had a wild 72 hours." I was like, "Well, what happened?" And he said, "Well, people kind of got word that we were building a cannabis machine, in the back of this place, in this well-known ice cream shop, and the police came over and said, you can't do this." And although we reassured them that, like, oh no, there's no cannabis here, this is a cannabis growing machine, it was still not taken to very, very kindly, because places are places and people are people, right? So it's very foreign to them. So we had to pack up all of our stuff, and luckily, we had one of our friends said, "There's this warehouse space, this place called Shetland Park." It was right within our price range. It was great. So we just moved every piece of material, everything that we had, we just stuffed it back into these into all the little moving pods, and moved it all the way down to Shetland Park, and started to actually build the first iteration. And they were like, "We're going to do this from scratch." So they did that they just placed their kind of like space on the floor, and just basically started building it by eye. Right. And lo and behold, this machine starts to erect itself. So I remember getting the first picture probably like maybe 2 to 3 weeks after they started to custom build this, after they scrapped this growtainer idea. And I'm looking at this structure, and it just evokes emotion for you, because you're like, wow, that is like nothing I've ever seen. And this is before it had any lights on it or anything. It was just the shell of something, right? And it just was very different. And of course, pictures started to come out to me a little bit more and a little bit more. And then finally, they got the lights in there, right? And this was probably a little bit before I quit Carestream to really join on with STEM Cultivation full time. And I get this text from Kyle, and he's like, "You got to check this out." And it just makes a sound like on the back, it's just beep beep, and just the whole thing just lights up. And we're talking a lot of Fluence Bio, the lights that we were using for our test grows, and the lights that we bought. And when you see that many panels of Fluence Bio lighting up, I mean, this is 24 panels of lights. It's a lot. It just glows like the sun, and we just all started. I mean, the first time I saw it live, I was like trying to record it to actually put it on YouTube like a professional, and I was like giggling like a school kid. I was just like, ha, 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 that's just the most amazing thing ever. But you know, and from there it really kind of, let's call it, took more formal shape. So we launched the company June 2018. Let's call it officially. We had an event. Bunch of people showed up. You know, and it was, let's call it, we had the skins on, and finally we had the irrigation system going, and we had like one of the first iterations of whatever HVAC was, and the feedback was just unbelievable. Nobody had ever seen a tower vertical hydroponic farm like this ever, right? Just because of the way that it is. I mean, it's not a wall, right? This is purpose built to grow cannabis, right? And it's just, you know, towers that are, you know, straight up and down. They've got 5 collars on each tower. And the irrigation system feeds that. So it's a Fertigrow system in the back where it's got a nutrient bath that pumps it through. And the plants come in at a 45-degree angle, and when they grow out and up, right? So it you know, certainly is a very unique way of doing vertical farming that nobody had really ever seen before. And since then, we've gotten a lot more formal in what we're doing, and now we're finally out there right now. So we are. I asked my CEO for official word on what I can say and what I can't say today. I had to call them on my way here. He's like, just say we're somewhere in Nevada. And I said, okay,
somewhere.
So we're somewhere in Nevada right now, formally putting this thing together, and the pictures that I'm seeing are pretty exciting.
Now, why vertical farming? Why use this technology? What is it about the what do you say, the biofluence lighting?
Fluence Bio. Fluence Bio is a well-known LED out there. They have been, I think they're not one of the first ones, I wouldn't say, but they put together really interesting, you know, kind of bar lighting, you know, and they're 650 watts per four box, right? So, but they allowed you to do a lot of things. You can hang these overhead, but you can also put them right in front of you, right? So, you know, that's kind of how we're doing this. And why vertical farming? We found that what happens when cannabis comes to a state and starts to basically, you know, goes through its regulations and competition starts to heat up, the more mature the market is, the faster the price drops, right? So when it first comes to town, you're, you know, $2,000 to $2,500 a pound. That's pretty good. I mean, that's not a bad price. But a couple of years later, that's gone down to $1,500 a pound. It's gone down to $1,100 a pound, or sometimes it's gone down to $600 a pound.
If you're in Oregon.
Well, if you're in Oregon, it's down to like $400 a pound, right? You know, and if you are not keeping track of what's going on from a cost per pound perspective, which, I mean, if you're not right in tune with what your back office is doing and you can't produce it for that much money, it's called going upside down, right? And you have to be very aware of that. So when you're doing a regular horizontal grow, of which, if you pay attention to cannabis cultivation, that's what you see. These sea of green grows, they're absolutely gorgeous, by the way. I've seen a lot of different types of high-tech facilities, and everybody does it a little bit differently, but they all look fairly similar to each other, right? But there's a lot of space that's just not being utilized within that grow space, right? So you've got where your canopy is, you've got where your lighting is, but there's really a lot of air between. And we thought that's why wouldn't you use that space, right? Like, why wouldn't you take a horizontal grow, which is this way, and then just flip it like this? So just take it and flip it 90 degrees, therefore filling the entire space with usable yield, right? So that's why we went vertical in the first place. It's let's get more yield out of this, but then let's also do it in a efficient manner where your cost per pound isn't going to drive you out of business, right? You're almost, you know, not guaranteed, but you are in a much better position to be able to stay afloat when you're producing more, you're producing it cheaper, and you're doing it in a really consistent quality way, right? So that's why we chose to go that particular route. And for us, it's just a gigantic math problem, right? It's math and geometry, right? The more you can get out of a space, the cheaper that you can produce it, the better you're going to be able to, let's call it, stay ahead of the market, right? So, and we've definitely seen people who just can't keep up, right? And they might be thinking, well, what other different ways of growing are there, right? And in looking in the AgriTech market at, let's call it, customized solutions, You've got horizontal, and then you've kind of got some vertical things out there. I just think that they're, certainly the meaning of vertical for most cultivation places is let's do a rack on rack on rack, right? You see those all the time, right? So you've got your first horizontal grow on one, the first layer, lights underneath that, and then on top of that is another rack, which is basically more, and then on top of that is another rack if you want to do a 3-spot, right? So, and even in those particular ones, although I consider that more of a horizontal stack on stack on stack, I think true vertical really uses all of the available space to grow. So when we say vertical, we're talking about true vertical farming.
So how did you figure out that if you were to flip this, I'm trying to wrap my head around this, when you flip the horizontal grow up 90 degrees, that the plants were not only going to be able to grow efficiently, but also be able to grow, you said they grow out and then they go up.
Correct.
How is that going to, in terms of a stem box and the dimensions of a stem box, how many plants are you going to be able to grow in one of these bad boys?
Well, right now, the stem box version 2 has 480 plants, right? So it's got 12 bays, and there are 40 plants in each bay, right? So whether or not that will change in the future, we don't know. But for right now, I think that's maximizing or maxing out the space that we have. So a stem box is 300 square feet, right? So think about that. It's not huge, but you're able to fit that many plants in that a lot of space. And the only way that you can do that is doing that kind of the growing model that we do, right? By the way, that model's not foreign, right? People have been doing this kind of model, but they've been doing it with bib lettuce. They've been doing it with sometimes with strawberries. They've been doing it with, let's call it, less hardy plants. And they've been doing it in, let's call it a less controlled environment, because these plants, although they do need a good controlled environment, cannabis is extremely picky about where it goes. You have to be very much in a Goldilocks zone. And when we're talking about controlled environment agriculture, so it's called CEA, right? That is high precision, extremely picky, extremely sensitive growing that you have to watch consistently and constantly. And it has to be a repeatable model, right? If you want the same kind of quality and consistency, that's what we call dialing in a grow, right? So,
and that's cannabis cultivation for me is so fascinating because there are countless variables that go into the grow process. Anything from soil contents and the nutrients and the lighting and everything in between. And unless you have a fully controlled environment, it's impossible to continue to produce consistent products. I think that's where you guys are going to see a lot of your value. And I look at a lot of these companies, these big companies like Canopy Growth and Acreage, who are doing these mass grows across hundreds of acres, right? And I can only imagine that this is a plant that needs a lot of TLC and a lot of attention. And you're setting, in my opinion, you're setting yourself up for failure if... what happens if you own a 100-acre grow and you get a pest infestation or mold? Does that destroy the entire crop? I feel like having a stem box, and you guys are setting yourself up in the businesses that you work with an insurance policy.
Well, yeah, that's kind of the theory behind it. But you're right. Large grows do have. They have their challenges, right? So there's a lot of things that can certainly dip a grow or knock a grow out, right? Pests, mold, heat, right? Too much humidity. It has to be something that's very, you have to watch it a lot, right? So, when you're looking at a box like what we do, it's a very confined environment, right? So if you had, by the way, if you have 100 acres worth of grow, by the way, I'm not sure if you understand how big that would be gigantic, right?
Massive.
But if we're looking at, let's take a typical cultivator, right? So we consider a typical cultivator usually anywhere between about 10,000 to 30,000 square feet, right? So that's a pretty large facility. And with that, if you're doing a horizontal grow it's open, you're consistently and constantly looking for hot areas. You're looking for problem areas. It's a hard thing to control. And if you do have systems go down, if one of your crops starts to go down, it will start to go down all the way across the board. But by doing it in a custom environment like we do, if you break it up, if we do have a catastrophic failure, that's one box that has a catastrophic failure. It doesn't spread out, right? So it's almost like a risk or an insurance, right? By doing it this way, you're guaranteeing that if you do have a catastrophic event with one box, it's not going to spread out to the other boxes, right? And stuff happens all the time. Even the best growers, even the best cultivation facilities have problems. It's just sometimes it's the unpredictable, some things just happen, right? And it's just the way things go, right? So it does present, let's call it a lower risk model of what we're doing. But the quality and consistency portion of it is a big deal, right? So by being able to dial in your nutrient dosage, by being able to dial in consistent temperature and humidity controls, knowing what your CO2 levels are, knowing what your O2 levels are, and being able to, let's call it, dial in a certain recipe that's good for that particular strain, right? So whatever you're growing, whatever the case may be, by getting that repeatable data, that's how you can dial in a better recipe. And how better to do that than in a small controlled environment that is the air is being scrubbed, right? Scrubbed by UV. It's a fully contained environment. It's being watched all the time. And the nutrient dosage has been dialed in, and it's just an easy thing to be able to maintain. That's also something that comes along with being able to do something like that is ease of maintenance, right? So it's not something where, if you have a cultivation facility that's 20,000 square feet, that's a lot of labor. Yeah. That's a lot of people walking around but they're probably responsible for how many lights in this particular thing, and they're walking around and trying to figure out what's going on. And, that's just, it's a lot of people that you need working on things. I think the STEM model certainly, let's call it, reduces the amount of labor that you have to be able to put to that. And the less labor that you have, the better you're going to be able to control your cost per pound as well.
And I think that's you probably agree with me that the biggest roadblock in the industry right now is having small businesses build infrastructure and doing it at a scale where it allows them to get to market as soon. We look at Massachusetts, who went legal, was it last year, 2 years ago, for an adult use program, and it took their infrastructure a while to get up and running.
I think they formally voted for it in 2016. They finally just got adult use ones on board in 2018. So adult use facilities and product manufacturers and retailers, I think it was November of 2018. It took them that long to come up with, the ability to, let's call it, get the licensing structure together, which basically just meant that they're just going to flip over their medical people. Yeah. That's the way that they did it. But, those people actually have cultivation infrastructure. Either they did that or they're able to easily siphon off a little portion of it or what they wanted to do. But a brand new cultivator, it takes a long time to get that type of thing up and running. Lead time on those things can be 9 to 14 months from the minute that you know where your space is and you have to build that space out. That's a long time. Yeah.
I definitely foresee you guys bringing a solution to the New York State industry, because just think about the licensing process that you have to go through in New York State. It's expensive, it's complicated, and then if you happen to finally get a license, then you have to start the infrastructure build, and you have to get employees, and you have to get all the things necessary to build a business. Like you said earlier, $2 to $5 million for a startup. And as somebody like myself who was an entrepreneur, or am an entrepreneur, I didn't have $2 to $5 million in starting capital. I'd venture to say that 99% of entrepreneurs don't. So how do you foresee STEM cultivation helping small businesses? Is that where your main customer is? What's the goal for when you guys are ready to release?
Well, we're called pop-up infrastructure, right? Pop-up infrastructure means if you want it, we'll get it to you, and it will take a lot less time. So, our plan is to obviously watch New York and see what they do. And if we decide to go adult use, there have been talks of who's going to get priority in those particular instances, right? So I'm hearing a lot of minority, women-owned, and small businesses. Let's let those folks have at this. And no vertical integration, so it's like you're either a cultivator or whatever. So when we're looking at these cultivators, they're going to be around scrambling for space, right? So the first thing that they're going to try to do is go find a space. If they're going to go the traditional route for horizontal, right, and they want to build that out, they are going to have to find a space, get permission, either rent or buy it, which is, either way. And then they're going to have to start building that out, which means that they're going to have to redo all the internals, right? So they're going to have to clean the space out, repaint it, buy all the lights, buy all the irrigation systems, get all the HVAC done, get all the fans. I mean, everything that goes along with this, dosing systems. I mean, there is going to be, a lot of things that need to happen. Can you imagine how many subcontractors that's going to be for them, or how much effort that's going to take? And this is because this is how we know how to build cultivation facilities. It's been tried and true. It's been going on for a long time. Indoor growing's been going on for a while. And they're going to follow the exact same path. So it's going to take them. I can just see this happening. Even a 5,000 square foot facility, which is a small facility, say they siphon off 3,000 square feet for cultivation. It's going to take them at least 6 to 8 months to get all of that stuff fine tuned, in there, purchased, moved, and then up and running. And who knows how we're going to do that, right? Are we going to wait? Is New York going to wait? Be like, listen, I'm going to give you your license and now you can start building, or do you need to have a building plan and then give us the building plan, then we give you your license and then you go. So you have to add the licensing on top of that. These folks are looking at a lot. But when you have pop-up infrastructure, pop-up cultivation infrastructure, it's like, listen, where do you want this? We want it in this particular space. Great. So where do you want your veg? You want your veg over here? No problem, right? Where are you going to do your drying and curing? Right there? Fantastic. So this is our space. Can you just do me a favor? Repaint, clean this up, right? And then we'll have the boxes in here. Just do us a favor and make sure that it's there's no holes in the roof. Make sure this is a structurally sound thing. Make sure it's cleaned out. And we will literally act as your cultivation infrastructure, therefore saving you a ton of time, right? So a 5,000 square foot facility, you got to figure how many stem boxes could fit in there, 300 square feet each, right? We're looking at what, 15 stem boxes? 15 stem boxes can be delivered and built in 3 months. I mean, you are up and running, making money, all right, which gives you the jump on your competition. It gives you a leg up because you're doing the most advanced type of farming possible. And the cost per square foot, if you do it the way that you're supposed to do it with horizontal, you're looking at somewhere between $150 to $300 per square foot. I mean, that's how much it's going to cost you. With us, it's much, much cheaper.
So you guys are a turnkey solution, a business in a box.
Yep. Or you can make the entire room a stem box, which is it's even better. Like, so some people have been like, we've got some really wonky, it just like listen, this is lining up here, this is crooked here, right? It's just something where stem boxes might not be able to fit to the space. There is a model where we can actually make the entire thing into stem rooms. So we just basically build it and then just basically break it up without even having to bring a stem box in there. We can just make everything into a room.
So you don't even have to get a stem box. You can just have a stem room. So say I had like I said, a couple 1,000 square foot warehouse, and instead of buying a box, I can just say, hey, come cannabis proof my room so I can start growing. Is that how that works?
You got it.
Whoa.
And that's certainly an option. I mean, for right now, our proof of concept is to perfect things using the stem box model. But we are certainly are looking at, let's call it, going to the room model as well, right? So.
Let's talk a little bit about the metrics and the production capacity of a stem box and the energy efficiency. That's really where I was really excited when I started learning about you guys, is how you can produce 3.5 times, 4 times the amount of plants on a fraction of the carbon footprint. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I think it's because of how much yield you can get out of a specific space, right? So I think during our test grows, I think we were averaging somewhere between 2.5 and 3 a light, right? So it's 3 pounds. But what we're looking at is how much does it actually cost to produce that? So I am not allowed to kind of release what our cost per gram is or what our cost per pound is. But let's just say that one of the companies that you mentioned, Canopy Growth, we're beating them pretty bad. Like,
no kidding.
And I mean, like their cost per gram is not ideal, right? So, and I think that you're going to see that metric a lot. What's the cost per gram, right? If compared to what an outdoor grow would be? So the last actually figures I saw and measure was outdoor grows were between a nickel and 15 cents per gram to produce, because it doesn't cost very much. All you have to do is put it in the soil. The sun does the rest of the work, get your labor and all that stuff. But indoor, I mean, if you're averaging, and this is what they said, if the average is 90 cents to $2 a gram, that's kind of like where the average is for indoor grows on a horizontal perspective, right? So I think that the companies out there that are going to lead the way are going to be sub 50 cents per gram.
And it's only going to be climbing closer and closer, lower in that. I mean, the more tech that emerges, the more the more clarity we have around legalization. I mean, hell, imagine what happens when we see a federal descheduling. I mean, that's going to open the floodgates. And most people are talking, when you think about the cannabis industry, most people are talking about growing and then selling it. But everybody's forgetting that there's this whole sea of AgriTech and agronomy happening that is really going to lay the foundation for the innovation that's going to happen in this industry. STEM, my interests really, that my interests lie in endocannabinoid science and really being able to delve into and explain what is the why behind why cannabis works. What goes on beyond THC, beyond CBD when we start talking about things like CBG and CBN and being able to grow micro grows, which are cannabinoid specific. So I see a huge opportunity, especially in the medical realm and the research realm, to be able to explore these cannabinoids one by one and you may even have some insight on this, and the emergence of the hemp industry kind of showed us that when you grow cannabis for high in THC, it seems to be comes low in CBD, and vice versa with industrial hemp. Industrial hemp is bred high in CBD and low in THC, with a whole array of secondary and tertiary cannabinoids and flavonoids and terpenes. My theory is what happens when we start looking deeper into the genetics, when we start seeing CBG specific strains, which I'm working with a company in Oregon right now that is growing high CBG strains. Does that mean we're going to start seeing 50, 60% CBG strains and then inversely, low CBN and vice versa? How do you think that STEM will fit into this model if it does? Or where do you see the future of strain-specific cannabinoids going?
Well, that's a fascinating topic. I mean, genetics are getting extremely complicated. By the way, is it Oregon CBD seeds that you were talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, they're a great company, right? So there are some slamming genetics out there.
Oh, the company's Oregon CBD seeds? No, it's a different.
Gotcha.
Hemptown.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, on that side, if you just look even the hemp market, genetics are getting out of control, right? Where we lie in that is if we are using this in a controlled environment, right, you can produce consistent results, right? So if you find a Goldilocks zone that you like, right, and you're able to map that out, we can do it in an environment that doesn't allow you to have to do a whole room, right? If we figured out that after running this program, right, so after 2 weeks of veg and 8 weeks of flower or whatever that may be, if we're able to plot that solution and say, okay, well, this is why we got to where we were, run it again, and then run it again, and then run it again, and keep dialing in that thing so you keep getting consistent things. So I think that this works well for people who are doing medical. Okay, I think it works well for people who will be doing research because it's a consistent, it's a pharmaceutical process. We want to produce consistent quality over and over again with a very low, if not minimal or nothing error margin, right? So a margin of error. But I think that when you're looking at the recreational market, if you want to make a brand, and if you want to be out there and you want people to be talking about you, if they get a strain from you one time, they want that strain to be the same way every time that they buy it, every time they get it. So that's how you build brand recognition, is by being consistent, right? So if they get something and it's not exactly the same, or it's maybe not as strong, or it's not as tasty, they're going to kind of wonder what's going on with your consistency, what's going on with your model, right? So with cultivators, you have to produce quality every single time. It's relentless and it's unforgiving, right? So that's where the STEM model, I think, works particularly well.
Now, I think that there's going to be a use for this type of technology in both the adult use and the medical program, especially as we build a bigger and better medical program. We're going to start to see more consistent full spectrum products. But the problem is that most states who have legalized and have an adult use and a medical program, the adult use market seems to win out. I foresee that happening in New York right now because we have such a lackluster medical program. And you are a medical patient, correct?
For 60 more days, I am. Yeah.
For 60 more days. I can't imagine you'll be renewing your card based on your tone.
No, I mean, I got a communication from my quote unquote medical provider today. and I won't be renewing. No, with us. It's not the medical provider. I shouldn't say that, right? It's the rules and the handcuffs that these folks have that will allow me to. I'm just going to let it go until better rules come out, right? So, right here next door to us in Massachusetts, it's funny. The medical provider that I have has a subsidiary in Massachusetts that is one of the better, places that you'll ever go to go get medical. I mean, they have everything under the sun. Potency levels are up, phenomenal genetics, amazing opportunity to, if you want to go edibles, concentrates, carts, full flower, anything that you really want is available to you. But as soon as you cross the border back here, you come west, it's over for you. Doesn't matter where you stop. It's like, it's not even marked. You don't know what it is. It's not strain specific. There's no flower. There's no edibles. There's really not a lot. And I'm just like, listen, you're not going to get my hard-earned money if you're not going to participate in the way that I want you to participate, right?
Well, it's like they clearly, when developing the medical program, didn't ask the consumers, what would you want in a product? What do you want in a medical program? And I mean, I'm not a medical card holder, and I've never actually been to any of the medical dispensaries, but I've heard some horror stories just in terms of like such a huge lack of product transparency. As a medical patient, when you show up, you want to know what exactly you're getting. You want your products to be full spectrum. You want to know the strain. You want to know how they're grown. You want to know everything. And from the stories I've heard, there's a huge lack of transparency. Can you attest?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was surprised. I did not know what to expect with the medical program. All I knew is that I wanted to try it out, right? Like why wouldn't you want to go and just become, get into the legit stream and see what's going on, right? I just could not believe my eyes. I could not believe what I saw when I had my first dispensary experience here in New York State compared to other dispensary experiences, right? So it was more like going to RGH than it was going to a dispensary, right? Cold. It looks like more like a museum or a spa. It looks like a museum and a spa put together, right? Very beautiful, very cold. I think it was a waterfall on the wall.
Oh, wow.
And then I went into this separate room and talked to, I guess it was a pharmaceutical technician, a farm technician, or whoever this person was. I'm an advocate or whatever they call themselves. And she didn't know what was in the product. And she couldn't tell me anything about the process or anything like that. She's like, this is the product that we have. Would you like it? That's it. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I will take it. I will take this $90 0.4 gram. I don't know what's in here cart. And my experience with carts. We've gone through this tons of times. And I will bring that home, and I'm going to try it out. And by the way, I was allowed to leave without the proprietary battery for it as well. They just kind of set me on my way because I asked her, is this a 510 thread cart? She's like, absolutely. Like, fantastic. I guess that works. Where no, you have to buy their particular battery. I'd be surprised if people listening right now don't know who I'm talking about. It's going to be funny if they can't figure it out. But so I brought it home. I tried it once. It made me kind of sick. I tried it again because I was like, no, try it again. Just try it one more time. I tried it again the second time, which was not in the same day. It was the next day. Made me sick again. I was like, try it one more time. Tried it the third time. Made me sick. I just threw it right in the garbage. And I was like, that's it for that one. And what a disappointment. I mean, it was just hugely disappointing that I had such high hopes, right? That I was going to be able to, this is my go-to place. I was like, I know where it is. It's got plenty of parking. This is my stuff. I can't wait. But I just walked away with such a disappointment, just so disappointing compared to what I've seen out there. So.
I mean, that's a commonality in a lot of the stories that I've heard about the program. And it's like you show up, it's like this very hospitably dark, cold. It's, when I picture a dispensary, I picture this fun place, not quite like a coffee shop, but kind of a hybrid between like a medical office in a coffee shop or something fun. Cannabis isn't supposed to be super serious. It's not supposed to be like going to the doctor. I don't know many people who get up in the morning and say, I can't wait to go to the doctor today. I can't wait to go to the dentist. And that's not the brand that's not how we need to be branding dispensaries. And I feel like the people that are building these ROs are taking the wrong approach. And I believe it's because they don't have a lot of experience in this industry. They probably have big fat wallets, but not a lot of industry experience. And not, when you start a business like that, not, I understanding this industry it's very complex, especially when it comes to the science and the chemistry behind products. But don't you think you owe your patients due diligence to like understand the products that you're selling rather than just say, here's our proprietary blend of what?
At a very basic level, yeah. I mean, if you are going to build a medical program, you bring in medical patients and you'd ask them like just one very important question. What do you want? Like, what can we provide for you, right? And
Flour.
tell me what's going to work for you, right? So, let's not base it off of people who are going to be newly recommended to the program. Let's base it off of people who are buying off the black market and want a cleaner, regulatory tested and proven kind of model. And that's what this is really there for. I mean, some of the people that are taking medical cannabis have to have clean, consistent product. And they every time and time again, they can certainly regulate their dosage. I mean, someone with cancer has to have a clean product. They can't have mold in that.
Of course not.
They can't have any of the bad stuff that comes along with sometimes, some of these unregulated grows. But the other side of this is that, yes, there are those patients, right, that should be doing capsules and tinctures or, extremely complicated dosing systems. They just give you, 5 milligrams every single time. Here's what it is. You know where that is. But I think New York kind of missed the ball, or certainly was maybe a little afraid to admit that there are people here who actually smoke cannabis are on the black market. I mean, I don't know why would you be so surprised that people have been medicating for years and they understand where they're coming from and they know what they're doing, right? So I think that I've heard more often than not that they are very afraid that people are going to self-medicate or they're going to, let's call it, overdose, which anybody who has ever smoked cannabis understands that overdosing on cannabis results in probably couch lock, a bag of chips, and a glass of water.
Not death.
And not death. Netflix, but not death.
Yes,
absolutely.
Dating back to 15,000 BC, we're still at a stark zero overdose deaths.
It's true, but there's a more serious thing here is that if people can't get what they want here or can't get the program that they deserve, they're going to move, right? And I've talked to a lot of people who have been like, I can't do this anymore with New York State. I'm going to move to a state with a better program, and they just pick up and move to Massachusetts, or they'll pick up to move to Maine, or they'll go to another state that has something a little bit better for them. And New York needs to understand that is actually happening. It's a real thing. And they need to improve that medical program to, let's call it, get all walks should be able to go in there and be satisfied. But you guys have to let go of this smokable cannabis thing. You have to let go of that. They're so afraid of that. And it's like the monster that just can't, it's going to burst out of the closet like the Kool-Aid, man. No, that's not going to happen. Like, everything's going to be normalized, because I hate to bust it to you guys, but it's happening right now just on the black market. So there's really going to be actually no drastic change.
Well, the initial medical program that was designed by Richard Gottfried contained smokable cannabis, and in an 11th hour decision, smokable cannabis was removed from the bill. And that's probably been one of the most defeating parts of this program, is that you didn't give the people exactly what they want. But the good news is that the bill that was released last Monday from Richard Gottfried, it was essentially a medical program 2.0, allows smokable flower. So the language is kind of vague when it came to consumption methods. So I don't know what the language will be around, what about dabbing, or what about concentrate? So I think that they need to improve the language in the new bill. But smokable, I believe smokable flower will be in the next revision of the medical program.
Well, look at that. I mean, that right there is progress in itself. I remember I wrote Dr. Zucker about this problem. By the way, I'm not one of those people that complains and then just doesn't do anything about it. I wrote Dr. Zucker 3 times, explaining to him like who I was, what I thought the medical program could be, and certainly some things that he should consider, like loss of revenue, people moving out of the state. I mean, it's just you're not servicing your client base, right? And I got a letter back from one of their quality and regulatory people, and right down the very, very bottom, it did say dried like shake or something like that. And I heard from another person that you can actually buy some dried shake flower, right? So That's interesting, right? So it's like that's like the McCormick model. You know, McCormick is like the dried
spices.
herbs that you can buy. So that's what you're able to get, which is even more insulting than actually not allowing medical cannabis that you could smoke, right? So it's like why would you give me that alternative? I told you I need all of this stuff. There are legitimate medical strains out there that we could be growing right now and selling to people, and it's going to happen. They're going to go home, they're going to medicate, and they're going to love you for it. Like, it's just that simple of a move. But you've got people who are not cannabis users making decisions for cannabis users, and that has to stop.
It's so crystal clear to people like you and I and the members of Roc NORML of why we need to create a system that encompasses medical, adult use, and hemp. It doesn't matter what side of the political line that you sit on, whether you're red or blue. I don't care. Nobody cares. This is a green issue. This is a bipartisan issue. And the only way to implement a successful cannabis industry is to allow all three and not to shackle it with regulations. We're already seeing in the bill, in the previous bills, regulation after regulation after handcuff after handcuff. This is a consumer-driven industry. We've been consuming cannabis since the 1930s. People have been going to prison for it, and there's no sign of slowing down. If you bring an industry and allow it to be legal, which means it will be decriminalized, and the rest of the states around New York continue to legalize, consumers are going to have better access to more quality cannabis, and we're going to just continue to buy it until the market evens itself out and is more consumer friendly. And I don't think New York State understands that. It's because the people at the top have no experience at all.
No. And I wouldn't expect them to, right? These folks probably know 60 seconds about 150 different things. I don't expect them to be cannabis experts, right? What I do expect, though, is if you're going to be making laws that affect people, that you hire a panel of experts to come talk to you about it that just aren't on one side or the other, that really kind of, let's call it, span the whole thing. They go the gamut. And it's their responsibility to become a quick expert, but have someone in their ear that's let's call it relatively experienced, right? So I do see some of those folks coming kind of out of the woodwork now and being able to let's call it influence what's going on. But I just don't think that when New York originally started looking at this, they had enough of those people to the table and said, I want you to do me a favor. Why don't you build a program and we're going to take a look at it, and we're gonna kind of let's see how this rolls with the people out there that are going to be able to participate in this. And lo and behold, I think they did about that much of that, like a very small amount. And then as soon as that stuff came out, people just started tearing it apart. I mean, we're all a part of that, right? So, well, I don't want that, or I don't want this, or this doesn't look good, or this is never going to fly. So I think that we do have to realize one thing. Medical program needs to improve. When it comes to the recreational adult use program, we need to beat every other state, period. Right? We have already seen other states' playbooks. It's right out there. You can literally go into every state's cannabis control commission or their health department, whoever runs this particular program, and you can one-up them all, right? And you should be trying to one-up other states. Just destroy the black market as much as you possibly can. Make it inclusive, right? And give people the variety and selection that they're looking for. It's just that simple.
Well, that's the nice thing about being late to the party, about being 12th state to legalize. We have 11 other states and case studies to look at. What worked, what didn't. We can pull all the things that worked, put them in our own bill, put social justice at the forefront, create a small business focused industry, and you're set, lo and behold, you will have a successful industry. It is not rocket scientists, and I'm afraid that New York State is going to screw it up. But that's just kind of what New York State does. Dave, this has been an incredible conversation. You and I could chat all day long. I'm really glad to have you on the show. This week, we should see a new version of the adult use cannabis bill, which we'll talk about in the next coming weeks.
All right.
Again, everybody, thank you for listening. This is Roc NORML Radio.